All right, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for
I think I'm going to go without it.
September 22nd. We have Lew Freedman, who's going to be addressing our group. We'll get to that in a second. Just some news of what's been going on. I want to wish everybody on board who's celebrating Happy New Year to who's ever going to be celebrating the New Year Sunday night. So Happy New Year to whoever is celebrating. Next week, we have another Lew Hernandez. Lew had spoken previously about John McGraw. Next week, he's going to talk about the 1933 Giants and Bill Terry. Tonight, we have Lew Freedman. Lew has a brand new book out on Johnny Mize called Biography of Baseball's Big Cat. He'll be discussing that. Emphasis mostly on his tenure with the New York Giants, but his career as a whole. Lew will also be back next year to go over an earlier book he did, but I know a lot of you are San Francisco fans and are lovers of the Dominican dandy Juan Marichal, so Lew will be back, hopefully, to discuss that book as well. But it gives me honor to introduce tonight's guest. Welcome to the Giants Preservation Society, Mr. Lew Freedman. Lew?
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Lew.
And Johnny Mize became a topic for me because I felt he'd had a great career and was somewhat overlooked. He wasn't a guy when you sat around shooting the breeze with baseball people who's, people started immediately talking about his greatness. It didn't happen like that. And so I decided to look into him. That involves spending a bunch of time at Cooperstown in the research files of the library there. They know me well there, and I always enjoy going there. But, Johnny Mize had really three distinct major league careers, and all three were special in their own ways. The New York Yankees is where he finished. The Giants were in the middle, and he came up with the St. Louis Cardinals. And he was first given a chance to play with the Cardinals in 1936, but he probably should have been in the majors a year or two before that. They had a pretty good first baseman, Rip Sewell. I think there were two Sewells at the same time in the league, but and he was an all-star, so that made it harder for Mize to break in. And Branch Rickey was hesitant to promote him. And then later, he was hesitant to pay him what he was worth, which is how he ended up joining the Giants. And Mize had some terrific years with the Giants. If you've looked at his record, he won. His first year with the Giants was 1942. And then he is, like so many of the biggest stars whose careers were interrupted by World War II, he disappeared from the stats for 3 years. He lost the years. Really, he was 29 when he played his first year with the Giants, I think, and 33 when he came back. So we all know what that can mean to a guy's career and how those could have been prime years. He ended up with 359 home runs and easily would have been over 400 if he hadn't missed those years. So many of us who, look back at history and follow baseball do wonder about so many of those guys, from Warren Spahn, who didn't start till he was later, to Ted Williams, to Bob Feller, and what their stats would have been. Certainly Bob Feller would have won 300 games, right? Everybody agrees on that, unless they had a fluke injury. Who knows what Ted Williams's numbers would have been? He would have hit 600 home runs probably. The interesting thing being that he still ended with a 344 average. But, he missed that chunk of World War II and the Korean War. I don't know this for a fact. Maybe one of you folks knows this. Is he the only one that missed time like that in his prime twice? I never can think of anyone else offhand. But, there's the Williams situation. But Johnny Mize was one of them. And he was in the South Pacific. He wasn't in the heart of battles as much as working on military bases. And he played a lot of baseball when he was in the service. A lot of those guys did have that opportunity. I mean, I don't think Joe DiMaggio was ever in the front lines either. But so by the time Mize went to the Giants in 1942, he was an established star. I mean, he was a regular. Once he got the first base job for the Cardinals, he stayed in that job, and he was a great successful player. He won a batting title. In 1939, he had 349. This is not a guy who ran out a lot of infield hits. He might have been called the big cat, but he was not a speedy guy on the bases. Some people said he was slow, but he was quick around the base. I think there's a difference between speed and quickness. He may have been the kind of guy who might have been a lineman or something in the NFL, with those big guys with the quick feet, but who have no, long distance speed at all. That might have fit him best. But he did some incredible things with the bat. And one of my favorite things I learned about Johnny Mize was just that. He loved his bats. Unlike, guys who are very cavalier, this is a guy who made a study out of using bats in different circumstances. There were stories about him. Phil Rizzuto used to tease him about it when he got to the Yankees, about the fact that, the team would go on the road with the trunks of equipment, and there'd be 2 big trunks for the bats for all the other players, and then there'd be 1 or 2 whole trunks just for Johnny Mize. And he would give advice to hitters later in his career, Rizzuto included, on how to hit and how to change their bats. So he made a science out of it. I mean, Hillerich and Bradsby must have loved him. I mean, he was selling their bats left and right. He would have an emphasis on using this kind of bat if he knew he was going to starter was going to be a fastball pitcher, and he would alter the size a little bit and the weight, and he would do that for a curveball specialist if he knew he was going to do it. And he had a great swing. People admired his swing. So it's funny because the Big Cat nickname really comes from. It's one of the stories about how he got the nickname was that in practice one day, his infielders were throwing the ball wildly, but he was catching everything. Instead of the balls being thrown into the stands or in the dirt, he was picking everything up. And I forget what the guy's name. He wasn't a famous player, but he was well enough known for a crowd like this. But he said, "Look at that guy pick up everything. He's like a big cat around first base." So that moment of glory fielding gave him the nickname. But he really was the big cat swinging. And a couple of players, Stan Musial, tried to apply the Big Cat nickname to Mize because of the way he hit the ball. And Musial was a great admirer of Mize, and very much resented the Cardinals trading him to the Giants. He said if the Cardinals had kept Mize, they would have won at least 2 more pennants. And the reason the Cardinals didn't keep Mize is because he wanted more money. And Branch Rickey didn't want to pay him. And Mize, by that time, was disillusioned with negotiating with Rickey and was ready to move on if somebody wanted him. And he had watched the Cardinals part with Joe Medwick for the same reason. And, Medwick wanted more money, and he had a big argument with Rickey. So when Mize went in to negotiate, he kind of knew how it was going to go, and he wasn't going to get what he was asking for. And the next thing you know, he's a New York Giant. And the Giants, he was with the Giants in 1942 for 1 year before he went into the service. And he had a good year. I mean, he always had solid years. I mean, right up till the end of his career, when he was reduced to being more of a pinch hitter with the Yankees, he only had 1 year where he had a bunch of injuries, or a significant injury. He would go out and play. If you look at the games, 155 games, 153 games, 149 games. Those are all with the Cardinals. Then the first year with the Giants, 142, 154, and 152. Most of the time, he was there to play and healthy enough to play, and he hit. His greatest individual season was with the Giants after World War II. I mean, he never could win a pennant with the Cardinals. They would finish second in some of his good years. And he didn't win a pennant with the Giants, but he did have his best single individual statistical year in 1947 after World War II. There was some doubt how he would be. And he came back in 46. He only played 101 games because he did have an injury. But he played well as long as he could play, without that injury. And he was his usual self. Then you come around to the 1947 season where he plays in every single game. He scores 137 runs to lead the National League. He drives in 138 runs to lead the National League. He hits 51 home runs, and he leads the league in that. And that was his greatest single home run year. He had other years where he hit in the 40s, and he did lead the league in homers one other time. Again with the Giants the next year, but that was 40. Then he got into right around that time is when he started getting into individual battle with Ralph Kiner every year to see who's going to lead the league in home runs. And we all know, we all know that Kiner had led the league for 7 years in a row, was it? I think, give or take. But one year they tied, and that was the 51 homer year. So they kind of eyed each other because certainly in terms of the Pirates, they weren't winning. They weren't contending for the pennant. All they had was Kiner back then. That was when Branch Rickey went over to the Pirates. He's supposed to be rebuilding them. And Kiner wanted a big raise from him. And Branch Rickey said, we finished last year with you, and we can finish last this year, without you. And he traded him. But anyway, so Johnny Mize had really good tenure with the New York Giants. They didn't win a pennant, but he was a very valuable player for them. He was a 10-time All-Star. So, wherever he went, he made All-Star teams. And then when the Giants let him go, and he wasn't sure if he was going to retire. And he actually ran into Casey Stengel. This would be called tampering these days. He was still a Giant. And I think he ran into Casey Stengel in spring training his last year with the Giants. And he could sort of see the handwriting coming up that his career might be coming to an end. And, Casey knew him from the National League, just kind of knew his reputation, knew, what he could do. And he was in his early days leading the Yankees. And, they were shooting the breeze. And, Johnny said, trade for me. Take me. I'm ready to come. I'm in the other part of New York, but I'm happy to move to the Yankees. And lo and behold, that it came to pass. I mean, originally, before the end of the 49 season, I mean, they had that conversation, some months before. But, Mize played most of 1949 with the Giants, and he ended up with the Yankees for 13 games of the regular season. But what really counted for him was that he went to a pennant winner. And in fact, people who follow baseball know that was one of those fabulous Yankees untouchable streaks where they won 5 in a row. And Johnny Mize goes from being shut out as a champion with the Cardinals and the Giants to winning 5 World Series rings. And his role diminished to being, a part-time player. I mean, his last year he played in 81 games, like half the season, and he didn't hit much for power. And sometimes they put him in a couple innings at the end of a game, pinch hitting, 81 games, but a lot of them were pinch hitting. He didn't get a lot of at-bats. But then when the World Series rolls around, he became a big cheese again. Stengel was, who was very wise in the way he deployed players as platooning them, filling in, going with his gut, what guys could do. He would call on Mize at critical moments, and Mize came through in the World Series. These were like sort of the frosting on his career, really, you could say. His Giant period may have been his most productive in terms of power hitting. He probably hit better for average in the beginning with the Cardinals, but he probably had the more clutch hits in big moments in the World Series as the capstone to his career with the Yankees when everybody thought he was finished. And he had to be talked into coming back that last year. He had told Stengel over the winter he was probably going to come back and play one more year. And then when it got time to get in his car and drive to spring training that year, he decided he didn't feel like going. He told his wife he was going to quit. And then she said, you really should play the one more year. You promised Casey you were going to do it. And then he has the big World Series. I mean, if you look at his 1953 stats, he appeared in 81 games with only 104 at bats. So that sounds like he just pinch hit, really, barely more than at bat a game, you know. So I don't know if anybody got more bang out of their showing in a short period of time. But so he had his glory moments that really enhanced his hitting reputation with the Giants. And then he had this finale of series of 5 years where he could walk off into the sunset as a world champion multiple times. So it was kind of interesting because there were 3 distinct periods of stardom. And then he didn't get elected to the Hall of Fame for years and years. You know, he kept wondering what they held against him. And he finally got taken in many years later by the Veterans Committee. But I thought about that a lot too. There's not a lot of evidence of people having grudges against him so much as he wasn't one of those guys that chit-chatted, who made friends with the writers. He was never buddy-buddy with them, the guys who voted. You know, it just wasn't his nature. You know, and so he wasn't that type of guy. And, you know, I mean, I listened to an athlete today that I've never seen before at a media day for college basketball. And it was a young woman who transferred home to Indiana from Oregon. Never seen her play for a second. They put her up there to meet the press, and she was a chatterbox. So she made an amazing first impression. I turned to the guy next to me and said, she's going to be a tremendous go-to quote after games. And I guess Johnny Mize never was. And like I said, that's the first impression formed by this woman whose name I had never heard before today. So I guess when it comes to a long-term relationship, and you got to realize, of course, 2 of those teams were in New York, so a lot of the writers were the same. It wasn't like a new body or a new group of writers going from the Giants to the Yankees completely. The guys might have already had their impressions of Mize as he's not a guy who's going to tell us good stories. And it might have carried over. But, and really, you know, when I'm doing a book like this, you want somebody who left behind a tremendous amount of thoughtful quotes. And I had to work at it. He was one of those guys. And they still were not going in the locker room as much as they did later, but it was well past the dead ball era when sports writers never talked to guys. Cy Young never talked to a reporter in his life in the locker room, I don't think. Those reporters wrote the game story and went home from the press box. The difference was when I was working on a book like that is Cy Young lived to be 88. And he did many in-depth interviews later in life. People would go to his home and talk about him, you know, ask him questions about the old days. And there'd be magazine stories in the old files. And Johnny Mize, it was like, you know, people were going into locker rooms by then, you know, the late 40s, early 50s. But he was not that gregarious at his locker room. So they went to somebody else. They went to Yogi Berra, who was probably going to give him a funnier quote, or guys like that, you know, that he was teammates with. So that's the only theory I really have about why they didn't vote him in by, in the writers group. And we see that all the time. Guys go, I mean, I remember when the Hall of Fame had that special committee to review the Negro Leagues. And the first two guys I thought would get in when they reviewed it were Buck O'Neill and maybe Minnie Minoso. And neither one of them were in the 17 people group years ago when they did this. I was very happy when they both got in this year. And I saw Minnie all the time in Chicago when I was around. He used to come to the ballpark all the time. So not just talking to him for stories, but just, hey, how are you? And I once had a long individual session with Buck O'Neill, greatest guy in the world. So it's like, so these things happen over time. And, look at Jim Cott get in. Should Tommy John be in now? I'll be interested to hear you guys say anything on that, because he has almost the exact same number of wins as Mike Mussina and Jim Cott. And he's on my mind because I had to interview him for something with the Indiana Baseball Hall of Fame just last month. And then I was looking at his record. But between the three guys, and two of them are in the Hall and one isn't, the total number of victories differential is like 2. It's like 286, 287, and 288 roughly. So I can't explain why did it take years and years for Johnny Mize, who would say every year when they called him, and he got the word that he wasn't voted in, what do they have against me? I had a great career. I was as good as so-and-so. And then eventually people agree, but I don't know. We live in strange times with the Hall of Fame because of the guys who had some of the greatest statistics in history who are on the verge of never making it because of the drug issue. What do we know? Is Roger Clemens, Pete Rose, and Barry Bonds going to be in the Hall of Fame someday through the Veterans Committee after we're all dead? It's not impossible to picture that, is it? But Johnny Mize was afraid he was going to die before he got elected. So, but he didn't, and he got to go to the Hall of Fame when he was chosen. So, questions for anybody?
Hey, Lew.
On anything.
Lew, first of all, thank you so much for that great presentation. Could we see what the book looks like and what's the best place to get it?
It's backwards on my screen.
Not on ours.
Okay. Yeah. It's like a reverse sign here. That's the cover, if you can see it. It's from McFarlane, and you guys, I'm sure, as baseball people, are quite familiar with what McFarlane does, which also makes the book harder to get. You pretty much got to get it from McFarlane in most cases. I have tried a few times with different things to say, I know this is the guy's hometown. Let's do a book signing there, and it never happens. So I do lots of book signings for other groups, but and I'm always willing to do things like this and happy to chat baseball, but you never know with them. So it's anyway. I'm glad it came across in English for you, if you could say that, because I can't write backwards to make that happen. So.
I got 2 quick questions. Number one, when he did go into the Hall of Fame, I saw his plaque. There is no logo on the hat.
I'm gonna raise my hand and ask a question.
Yeah, I got you, Jim.
You go here.
I know he had the 3 separate tenures, and probably the Yankees he finished up and was more of a bit player. Who would you think best resembles his Hall of Fame career, the Cardinals or the Giants?
That's a trick. Like I said, I think he broke in with the Cardinals. He had his highest average with the Cardinals, but he had his best power hitting years with the Giants. And he wasn't unhappy, and did not leave with real bitterness from any of the places. He would have been quite happy to stay with the Cardinals if they paid him more. But that was a Branch Rickey thing. It wasn't like he didn't like St. Louis or anything like that. So, I thought about that, and I'm not sure I could pick. And it's too easy to say the Yankees because he won the World Series things, but he might pick them. But I didn't even realize
I saw that
one on there. Yeah,
I saw that the Cardinals have them in their Hall of Fame. The Giants
Yes.
do not have a Hall of Fame per se. My other question is, through your research, because he was a big left-handed hitter, how did he enjoy playing at the Polo Grounds?
He liked it, but he didn't have any problems anywhere. He never expressed, he liked hitting anywhere. He never, I don't remember him ever, coming across anywhere really saying, maybe I read one thing that I forgot, but, that he held, he really could hit. That was his thing. He loved it. He took pride in it. His lifetime average was 312, and he didn't strike out much. For a power hitter, that's one of the other impressive things about him. The year he hit 51 homers, he struck out 42 times in 560 at-bats. He was not a free swinger. He was a very discerning hitter. And he walked 74 times that year. Yeah, I'm just making sure. But he was like that all the time. The year before, well, I'm going to look for another 150-something game season where he struck out 49 times in 579 at-bats in 1940 with the Cardinals, 49 times in 564 at-bats with the Cardinals in 39. I mean, that's the way he hit. He was sharp. He had a great batting eye.
So much for launch angle, huh?
Well, he was not just a free swinger. I mean, he would have been appalled at those guys that strike out 180 times.
Thanks, Lou. Judge, you're up.
Hey, thanks, Lou. The salary dispute with Ricky and the Cardinals, I'm always interested in how much would have taken to keep him there and keep him happy. How much was that over? What was he making?
I don't know the exact numbers, but it would probably have been like 35,000. Yeah. Something in that ballpark. I use the term loosely, but by saying that it wasn't anything even like 50. And a lot of times they had disputes over $2,000 in those days. Yeah. When you read about them, you're surprised because we're so used to hearing about, the disputes over the difference between 5 million and 9 million now. But those other ones were, low amounts of money.
It's amazing how these teams lost some great players over so few dollars. It really is.
They didn't seem to care.
Yeah.
I mean, in Ricky's case, he figured he had so many guys in the farm system. He always had a replacement, even after Landis let loose all those players. But I think that was his general philosophy.
Yeah. So thank you.
Paul Ellis. Graham, you're up, Paul.
Oh, thank you, Lou. Yeah, thank you, Gary. My question really is about with the three teams that he played for, who were the players he was closest to on each of those three teams?
He was very close with Phil Rizzuto with the Yankees. He didn't have a ton of close friends. He had a mini feud going with Joe Medwick with the Cardinals. Stan Musial with the Cardinals, he was thought very highly of him. They were close. So think back with the Giants, who was right there. I'm not sure anyone stood out. The regular lineup was just friendly to him. He was on good terms with most people. The one I remember him not being good on terms with was Joe Medwick. It seemed like Medwick started to resent him because Medwick was the established star when Mize came up and started having a lot of RBIs and was being counted on for the same kind of power hitting. That's what what I read, it's in the records, that seemed to be the origin of him being testy.
Okay.
And Rizzuto, he, spoke very highly of him in many ways, including helping him improve. What was the year? Was it early 50s, the year Rizzuto hit like 324 and he won the MVP, 50, 51, somewhere. He credited Mize's tutelage and advice about bats and using them to help him have that year.
Okay. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Paul. Jim Weber, up in the last.
Lou, you said that Willie Mays was in Anchorage. Two questions. Do you remember where? Do you remember where that was? I'd like to go dig it up and put a plaque there.
Mulcahy Stadium, where the Glacier Pilots and the Bucks played, and it was a lunchtime experience, hour or so. A bunch of people from who were working in town came over, and and I would do something like ask, "Why are you here on your lunch hour?" And the great answer was what we all think is what the guy said. I still remember it. Is because it's Willie Maze. That simple, that direct. And yeah, it was 1984, the summer. I'm almost sure it was the first year I was there full time in 84. It could have been 85, but I'm pretty darn sure it was 84. And it was like, whoever expected to see Willie Maze in Anchorage, I don't even remember the real reason. Somebody brought him in as a sponsorship thing and trotted him around town to sell some kind of product, I guess. I only saw him at the stadium.
Yeah, that's why we should put up a plaque there. Second question was, tell us about Warren Spahn. You wrote about him about 40 years ago. What kind of a guy was he?
When I was a kid, he was my favorite pitcher. I grew up in Boston, and there was still a little feeling in the 50s and all into the early 60s of missing the Boston Braves. And I think, and the Braves were very good for Milwaukee at the time in 56, 57, 58, that stretch. They were in 2 World Series and won one of them. And, and Warren Spahn was great. He won 20 games every year. He had a physical resemblance to my father as well, who was also left-handed, but couldn't throw like that. So I think that's where my affinity for Warren Spahn came in originally. And I thought about it for many, many years. And the only books I ever found about him was, I had a book that I got as a kid. There was a thing called the Sport Magazine Library. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, from the early 60s. They did about 10 or 12 books. They were pretty prominent sports writers. If you look back at the names of the guys who wrote on them, a guy like Arnold Haino, if that name rings a bell, Silverman, guys like that. And I had the Warren Spahn book, and I still do. Pages are a little loose. It cost 50 cents. And it came in handy, actually, when I was doing the research. I had never seen it anyplace else. And then, of course, I used the files. And I just always admired the guy for playing so long and doing so well into his 40s. I mean, he pitched 2 no-hitters after he was 39, I think it was. And but my favorite line, and I've seen it as recently as just another book, it's something I was reading a couple of weeks ago, was, and he was very hampered by World War II. He played like 1 game or something for the Braves, and then was shipped to the minors by Casey Stengel, who said he had no guts. And he shipped him to the minors because he wouldn't throw at somebody. Casey wanted him to throw at someone, and he didn't want to throw at the guy. I think it was Pee Wee Reese. I'm not sure, like 40, 41 perhaps. And he refused to do it. And so Stengel sent him to the minors. And then later in life, Spahn goes back to the Mets at the end of his career. And who's the manager but Casey Stengel? Stengel talked about how he said he was the biggest mistake he ever made. And I call this guy someone with no guts, and he goes, wins a medal in the Battle of the Bulge. And in Spahn's comment is, I played for Casey Stengel before and after he was a genius, which I always love.
Thank you.
So,
thanks, Jim. Jeff Cohn, you're up.
That's one of my favorite quotes, by the way.
Isn't it great?
Yes, it is. One comment and one question. The comment is, I never realized that Johnny Mize was on the Yankees. And, looking at the roster, he played with Yogi Berra, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Jerry Coleman. I mean, unbelievable.
Whitey Ford came up.
Whitey Ford, yeah.
Ollie Reynolds, Ed Lopat, yeah. Vic Rashi. I mean, it was quite the loaded team. That's why they won 5 in a row.
Yeah. My question: after he retired, was he employed by any team in either a coaching capacity or maybe broadcaster? Was he involved in baseball after he retired?
A little bit. He did do some coaching. Never a manager, and he floated around. Then he went home to he came from a small town in Georgia. Came from a broken home, actually. His parents split up when he was in high school or starting high school, and the rest of his, youth was spent living at with grandparents and a grandmother. And the other wacko story about Johnny Mize is there was a small college in the community, which also had a high school by the same name. And when he was younger, he, his brother, and some of the local kids loved watching the college team play. They would go to their practices and they'd shag the balls in the outfield and hang around, looking up to the guys because they were bigger and older, even though they were not exactly major leaguers. You know, what is it called? Pine Hill Academy or something like that. But the weird thing is, he ended up playing for the Pine Hill College when he was in high school in Demarest, Georgia. And there is a Johnny Mize museum at that school that he played for. And he did come back and live in Demarest. He played a lot of golf there. And he became friends with, I don't know if you guys remember the name. I think he became the governor. I remember him more when he was lieutenant governor. A guy named Zell Miller became a big Johnny Mize supporter and wrote letters trying to get him into the Hall of Fame. I think when he was lieutenant governor, he did. I think he attended his funeral when he was governor. You know, some years had passed in his political future. So he ended up kind of disappearing from the scene over time after the little bit of time, you know, doing some coaching. When he went back to the small town. He actually was in Florida for a while. He was in business. I think he got divorced there. Or no, his wife, no, he got divorced. His first wife died in a house fire after they split up. And he married again. And he moved back to Demarest, Georgia, which is really a dot on the map. I mean, I don't know whether the closest big town is Augusta. I'm trying to remember. If you can picture the map of Georgia in your head, face on, it's like in the bottom right, off to the side towards the ocean a little bit. And I guess it might only be an hour or two from Augusta.
Mm-hmm.
So,
thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Ed Freer, you're up.
Yes, I have a question, but just as a side note, as long as you brought up Warren Spahn, in the mid-90s, I was in a celebrity golf tournament that Warren participated in, and he couldn't have been friendlier to my kids at the after-dinner banquet. I know he didn't have much longer to live after that, but I remember him taking my son's hat and turning it the straight way forward because he didn't like it backwards.
Yeah.
But, very nice fella.
What I heard about him was when he used to come back, even at the end when he was walking with a cane, I think, when he used to come back to the Hall of Fame weekend and they all hung around privately together at the Otsego Hotel, he was the big storyteller. And he was the one who was the funny man who kept them all laughing and telling them stories of the old days and things. But none of that was for public consumption. That was with the other Hall of Famers. Only those appearances there.
My question is, I was very interested in that comment about Phil Rizzuto saying Johnny Mize had a different bat for a different pitcher and different situations. You go into the book, and is anybody doing that?
Yeah, I did a little bit. You know, he would, like I said, he would carry more bats. You know, that was the joke. He would carry as many bats on his own as the rest of the team as a whole did when they went on road trips, when they loaded them on the trains. There'd be the New York Yankees bats, and then there'd be all these Johnny Mize bats. You know, and he couldn't have used all of them every time, but he had them at his disposal.
So perhaps it was lighter weight for faster pitchers, or
weights and lengths. And like I said, I think he had a pretty good rapport with the Hillerich and Bradsby people there. They probably liked it when he called, and he ordered more and more.
Does anybody use such a theory today?
That I don't know. I don't know what guys do anymore. You know, of course, it's not all Louisville Sluggers either now, right? We got a few other companies in there. Yeah, I mean, does Easton still make wood bats at all?
And not really.
Or do they just make the metal bats for the other games?
It's Louisville, Rawlings, Marucci, and that other company.
Yeah, it's more than a couple. It's 3, 4, right?
Yeah.
But Easton likes the metal ones, right?
Yeah, they're the big.
I mean, the sound, of course, is so different when you hear it, right? It's not the crack of the bat when you hit it with a metal bat.
I'm in the sporting goods business. I have a retail store, and we sell bats in some kind of.
Do you? Yeah. Do people use the Easton bats for college games these days too?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, metal bat is still good for college.
That's what I thought. Softball?
Metal softball too. Yeah, well, there is some wood softball, but no.
I just don't go to, actually, I don't go to any college games. I could. I live 40 miles from a team, but I live in the triangle between Louisville, Indianapolis, and Bloomington for Indiana University.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's like 40 miles here, 40 miles there, you know. So there's two AAA teams, as well as the Reds, if they're major league this year. The way they started this year, they didn't, but some of the teams caught up to them as the worst team. The Pirates, the A's, they looked like they were going to be the worst team ever when the season started.
Thank you very much, Lou.
Thank you, Ed.
Am I online now?
I'm sorry, Frank?
Am I online?
Yeah, you had a
I
question?
can hear you. Yeah,
Frank, I got two people ahead of you, and then I'll call
on. No problem.
Bill Karen, you're up. Bill, unmute yourself. You're muted.
Oh.
There you go.
Lou, thank you for your presentation. It's I enjoyed it very much. I just wanted to say that it was in 1950 when Phil Rizzuto won the MVP, and he had over 200 hits, which he never achieved again.
I always wondered why it didn't last, because he was still teammates with him.
Yes,
that was the part that was unanswered.
Yeah,
you know, that he helped me so much this year, but how come it didn't work with the bats the next year?
Yeah, who knows? But anyway, also Johnny Mize won 4 home run titles. The last 2 he tied with Kiner. And in 1939 with the Cardinals, he won the batting championship and the home run title. I forget who won the RBI title, but he didn't. So that year he had a great year.
He had a nice career in many disciplines. And as I mentioned, 10-time All-Star, mostly the National League, but they picked him his last year with the Yankees. So Casey did the picking.
Yes.
Single and picked him.
And also you spoke about Spahn, and I'm sure you know about this, but I think Spahn threw about over 200 pitches when he pitched a 16-inning game against Marichal that Mize won with a home run in the 16th inning.
I wrote biographies of both of them.
And Spahn was
you can't escape that game.
Yeah, and Spahn was like 42 years old when he pitched that game.
I can tell you a story about that game between Spahn and Marichal. Now, I didn't get it directly from Spahn, but I got it directly from Marichal. They both were in there forever, like you said. That pitched complete games, 16 innings, which we will probably never see again in our lifetimes.
Oh, never.
But the manager would go out to Spahn every game, every inning, or the beginning of every inning, and say, "I'm ready to take you out. Are you ready to come out of the game?" And he would say, "I'm not coming out of the game as long as that young guy stays in." And then they did the same thing with Marichal, and he would say, "I'm not coming out of the game as long as that old timer stays in."
Right.
So they told their managers that.
And also Marichal had said, "If you take me out, I'm going to be embarrassed in my country of Dominican Republic that a 42-year-old pitched longer than I did."
I mean, well, what a game. Somebody did write a book just about the game.
Yes.
About that one game, I believe. Yeah. I mean, they didn't count pitches the same way, but boy, I mean, what do you think the most pitches Nolan Ryan ever threw in a game? I don't know.
150?
Probably more. Probably one of his long ones before they started using the relievers. They probably did have him go.
And what's interesting, Marichal and Spahn, after 3 days rest, pitched again. Yes. Today they pitch with 5 days rest.
Yep. And now we don't even get guys who pitch 40 times now, right? The starters.
Right. Exactly.
That used to be the number, right?
Yes.
Well, going way back, those guys pitching every 2 days. And
now it's like 30. Now it's like 32 or 33 at the most.
That sounds about right for everybody.
Yeah.
The busy guys.
Definitely.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
The author of that book was Jim Kaplan, and Lou, you've whetted our appetite for when you come back to talk
there
about
you go. Jeff, oops. I
just
hit the screen and I lost you. What happened?
We see you fine.
Oh, I can't see you guys anymore. What happened?
I don't know. We see you fine. You better get the wife. I got one quick question before Dan. So I know it took a long time for him to get into the Hall. Did you consider, when you were doing the research, in your eyes, was he a no-brainer?
Well, he was already in, and so I didn't think too much of it. I didn't know it had taken him that long, and that it was the Veterans Committee. There was some stigma for a while for guys like him who felt like if they didn't get in from the writers, it wasn't as good, which of course, I've never encountered that in my lifetime. It always felt the same to me. You know, if you're in, you're in. So it didn't, well, I've lost my picture altogether of you guys. I don't know what's going on.
I see you fine. I see everybody.
I'm glad of that, but I can't get it back unless I turn it off. So I don't want to do that.
You're doing fine.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so I didn't think twice about it. I was more like coming in from the perspective of, well, there's always been a Veterans Committee voting guys in my whole life, you know? So I never thought about it as, you know, downgrading the value or anything, but he did feel that way a little bit. And I'm trying to remember when, you know, but he's back in the late 80s, I think. So I don't know.
He was inducted in 81, I think.
Yeah, okay. It was a little later than I remember, a little earlier than I remember. But yeah, I mean, I that has never affected my thinking. I was happy, like I said, this year. I happened to be corresponding with somebody at the Hall of Fame when the vote came out, and I sent a note to her, and I said, wow, big day for the Hall yesterday. What did they pick? 7 guys? 6, 7 guys on the Veterans Committee? And she said they were really taken aback that many guys got in at once. She wasn't downgrading it, but it seemed like there was a bit of amazement at the Hall, and these are the workers. They don't have anything to do with the vote, but just, well, it was like, wow, look at what they did, you know, all at once. But I was happy for those guys. You know, I didn't think, you know, Gil Hodges, people talked about him belonging for how long? He's from not that far from me here in Indiana. I've been meaning, one of these days I'm going to go up to his hometown and see the block-long billboard they have of him there. I have to make a side trip because it's about a 2-hour drive, and tie it in with some other part of the state.
I'm sure you know.
I've seen pictures of it. Yeah.
I'm sure you know his wife just passed the other day.
I just saw that. Yep. As soon as I saw that, I thought, well, she got that phone call.
Yeah.
And
all right.
Yeah, she was 95, I think they said.
Dan Levitt, you're up.
Lou, hey, thanks again. This is great. I want to just talk about when he was young, he got hurt, and the Cardinals sold him to the Reds, and the Reds then didn't want him and gave him back to the Cardinals. And I'm just curious if you could expand on that a little bit. That was kind of a funky story.
Well, he wasn't ready to play. It was like trading somebody injured who wasn't ready to go in the lineup. That was really what was behind that. He really couldn't suit up and play. I mean, he wasn't healthy. He was going to go right on the, you know. And so I think they thought they were getting cheated by getting an unhealthy player. It was my impression of that story or that situation. By the way, I did see your note about the 235 pitches for Nolan Ryan. That's kind of what I would have guessed. Something huge like that, you know. I did cover an amateur baseball game when I lived in Alaska. They have a summer league that was not the ones you're thinking of with the college guys, but a local league. And one guy pitched both games of a doubleheader and threw about 180, 190 pitches in one day. And, you know, pitching both ends of the doubleheader and winning both games. And this would have been like I mean, I don't even know if you'd call it semi-pro, amateur, because nobody got paid for that. But I remember that he did that. So.
Dan, did you have another question, Dan? Okay. Frank Lewis, you're up.
First, I report to you that Aaron Judge walked in his first at bat. Now,
thank you. I was waiting for your update.
Well, that's the update that I got. Now, Johnny Mize was a radio commentator either pre or post game sometime the first or second season after he was playing on the New York Giants radio station, WMCA. I remember listening to it. It was Johnny Mize and Johnny Most, Johnny on the Spot. You don't know that?
Johnny Most, that's right. I grew up with Johnny Most in Boston doing the Celtics.
That's right. Yep.
And I remember, now that you mention it, they weren't sure that he would be accepted in Boston because he had come from New York.
Right. He and Johnny Mize were like co-commentators pre or post game for at least 1 year, 54, 55, something like that.
Yeah. I don't know if I came across that or not, but it certainly wasn't covered heavily anywhere I, looked for it.
Warren Spahn was the involved in a United States Supreme Court case on his right of privacy. Spahn versus Julian Messner. He sued because they described intimate conversations with his wife, and he sued for invasion of privacy. Whether he won or lost, but that I don't remember.
Mm. Well, he even tried pitching in Mexico. He didn't even want to retire when he was, 45? He would have kept going if they kept him with the Mets, I think.
Thanks, Frank. Judge, you're up. Jim?
I don't know if you covered any of his minor league career, but as we're chatting, I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. I'm in Rochester, New York, and we were the minor league team of the Cardinals back in the 30s and
Right.
Up through the 50s. And I just was doing a little looking on the Google, and he's in a Rochester Red Wing Hall of Fame for his career. He was here 3 years, from 1933 to 35. And in 2004, he was inducted in the Rochester Red Wings Hall of Fame. So
that's cool. I lived in Syracuse at one point, but
right down the street.
Yeah. In fact, I was covering news in Syracuse, and I applied to one of the Rochester papers for a sports writing opening where they would have covered the Buffalo Bills and something else, and they never wrote back to me. And I got a job for the Jacksonville, Florida paper. Moved 1,500 miles. And about 2 weeks after I started the job there, the Rochester people called me and asked me if I wanted the job.
I was going to say, you'd be better off in Rochester than Jacksonville.
Well, but I just moved 1,500 miles and started a new job. They took a long time to call me, and then they didn't even want to interview me. They just wanted to offer me the job, and I would have gone to Rochester for that job, but I wasn't going to move back after that.
What year was that?
77. Yeah, 77.
Bob Matthews was the sports guy here at that time. Yeah.
I don't remember the name, but I mean, that's how it hit me, was like, you wanted me so much, you're ready to hire me sight unseen, but you didn't even call me for a month and a half or 2 months or whatever it was. I mean, it was a long time because, like I said, I got the other job, I moved there and started working there. So, I mean, a lot of time passed. They didn't even call. If they'd called and said, hey, are you interested? Come over, but we're not going to fill it till September, that would have been a different story.
Jeez, I feel bad. I shouldn't have mentioned Rochester.
I mean, it was weird. That's why I remember it. So,
yeah. Well, he's in their Hall of Fame.
Well, yeah, I believe it. And the only problem is he didn't really want to be there at the end. This is when he was really getting itchy that the Cardinals should be keeping him. Not the beginning.
35.
Yeah, that third year especially. It was like he didn't have anything against Rochester, but he felt he belonged in St. Louis.
Belonged in the majors. He had a real good year in 34. I was reading here.
Yeah, and that was it. He thought that was going to send him to the majors for good. So he was not a happy camper when he got sent down again.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that whole Rochester thing because I was thinking about my days of a few years in upstate New York, where it never stopped snowing even on the 4th of July. No, I'm only kidding. I will say this. I had more snow in the winter in Syracuse than I did in any single year in Alaska.
Yeah, we have a competition in Western New York, Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester every year.
You remember the famous Buffalo blizzard?
76.
That was right around that. Yeah. Yep. We had more snow that year in Syracuse than they did for the season in Buffalo.
Yeah.
They just had the bigger storm in Buffalo. We spread it out for the whole season.
There you go.
Thanks, sir. Anybody else have a question for Lew? Lew, again, how could we buy the book? And you want to again
hold it up, but I tell you, I can hold it up, but I can't tell you when you're seeing it.
It looks good.
Good. Okay, so I actually picked the right spot here.
So go through McFarlane or Amazon.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
And it was fun to do. And like I said, he's a guy worth reading about if you're an old-time baseball fan, for sure. And I love the baseball history. I mean, I keep wanting to do more. I'm just getting rolling on a book on Hoyt Wilhelm.
Oh, Lew, well, you have an audience for that as well. So please.
Another Giants guy in the 50s.
Yep. We got one additional question. Hindi, go ahead.
The 221 Club. Wasn't Johnny Mize in that? In 1947 or 1948, the Giants had over 200 home runs.
Oh, yeah. He would have been, well, he had tons of home runs in the late 40s for the Giants. You know, 51 homers in 47, 40 in 48. I think
that was 47, the 200, they had over 200 home runs.
Yeah, and he had his share, the biggest share.
He had the most. He
did. Yeah, that was a lot of home runs back then. I used to know the major league record for homers, and then I completely lost track of it. Is it the Twins who said it the year ago or so? I mean, it was like, where did the Twins come from? Setting and it didn't seem to be anybody who stood up, but it was a whole bunch of guys with 20. So, I used to know all of that with the year, and I used to keep track of it. But that was a big one.
Lew, thanks again. So we look forward to hearing about Marichal and now Hoyt Wilhelm as well. So
another year later.
Please
I got to find. This is what I need to find out about Hoyt. More about his childhood. That's where I'm starting. I got to go next. I got everything about his major league life. I just even some clips of him giving a show from a TV show showing how to show the knuckleball on YouTube. But I don't know much about his childhood with his tons of brothers and sisters.
You thinking that the cover's going to be in a New York Giant uniform?
Yeah, I have no idea. I never know what the cover is going to look like. Well, I shouldn't say not never, but easily half the time, I don't know what the cover is like that they pick before I get the book. Once in a while I do, and other times I don't.
Thanks again. Let's give it up for Lew.
Thank you, everybody. Anytime.
Lew, have a great night. We'll talk to you soon. And again,
thanks for having me.